When 15-year-old LaMelo Ball decided to pull up from half court in a 2016 high school game, he probably didn't realize that he was speeding up the Instagramification of amateur hoops. Sure, by this point, there were a ton of certified classic YouTube mixtapes from future NBA stars like Derrick Rose and John Wall, and then there were those who never reached those heights again, like Akil Carr and Seventh Woods. But this was different. It was a singular moment that was immediately shareable on an ever-growing platform designed to leverage the short attention spans of its young audiences and create celebrities instantly. Today, nobody questions LaMelo's basketball bona fides anymore given his status as a likely top 5 NBA draft pick. But that's also not the full reason why he's got more than 5 million Instagram followers. More than most of the biggest names in the NBA, including Zion Williamson, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, and Blake Griffin. And that's without playing a minute in the league. Sure, the Ball family's marketing intuition and willingness to share their off-court lives with the world plays a big role in this, but LaMelo's also just one part of a growing phenomenon of increasingly younger basketball stars building up their social media clout as the modern branding obsession and influencer economy seep into high school basketball. How have you been able to use social media to benefit yourself over the course of the last couple of years as we've seen more and more high school basketball players get more famous?
I'm sorry about this. My mom's calling. Let me text her real quick.
That is Namari Burnett, a 5-star recruit in the class of 2020 headed to play at Texas Tech. And in case you need another reminder that these stars are all incredibly young, that is Namari pausing our interview to text his mom. On Instagram, he's verified and he's got more than 50,000 followers.
Building your brand, that's important nowadays, and trying to promote yourself as much as possible in a positive way. I never expected this. I always thought once you make it to the pros, that's when your social media boosts.
Forget the pros. You don't even need to make it to college first. Take, for example, Paige Beckers, who's the #1 2020 women's recruit, who's going to play her first game at UConn with no less than 500,000 followers. And even 11-year-old prodigy Jiggy Izzy from Los Angeles has more than 100,000 followers. Granted, this isn't the first generation of teen ballers turned social media standouts. Zion Williamson's million-strong pre-Duke following is well established, as were the viral dunks of Mack Mcclung. McClung rose out of Gate City, Virginia, which is a small town of around 2,000 people, to become an early cog in Instagram's star-making machine. The Texas Tech junior now boasts more than 700,000 Instagram followers, and he's also not naive about what got him here.
It was like some of them wanted the highlight more than the offer, and right. I wanted the offer. I wanted, let me get this offer. They had all the big offers, the Blue Bloods and all that, and then they're like, oh, I want a mix. I want a Balls Life mix, like more than the offer. I was like, what? Like, it's just like kids wanted to be seen and famous more than they wanted the respect.
Coaches, players, and organizers in the youth basketball scene confirm McClung's observations. They say that the chase for online clout is not only tangibly affecting games on the court, but also how the athletes behave and are perceived off of it. Mike Schmitz has witnessed these changes firsthand in gyms around the world as an NBA draft analyst.
There are guys who play for highlights and guys who play to win. I remember being at a Nike Hoop Summit practice, and there was one player who really struggled, like played with no effort and just was very underwhelming overall to scouts, right? And there were some other media people in there as well. And, you know, within an hour, there's posts on Twitter, on Instagram, with a video of that player, you know, having one highlight and then the caption being, oh, so-and-so absolutely killed in front of every NBA team today. And then that player's out there retweeting it. From our perspective, we're looking, saying, wait a minute, like this guy just completely laid an egg and was very underwhelming to NBA scouts, but this is what's out there on social media.
Deserved or not, players can't manufacture that hype alone. Their internet audiences are legitimizing it, and then it trickles down to the traditional media. One of the latest examples is San Ysidro's Mikey Williams.
The one and only Mikey Williams, at Mikey on Instagram, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he's got 1 million followers. This is a 15-year-old with 1 million followers on Instagram.
This is prep basketball in 2020, when high school freshmen are polished interview subjects who rub elbows with the world's basketball elite.
Have you told LeBron that you compare your game to his?
I don't think I've told him that yet. You know, our conversations have been we've had a couple, but they've kind of been real short. But I haven't had the chance to tell him that. I'm sure he's seen it, you know, on the video or something.
Now, it's a safe bet that LeBron has seen a lot of what Mikey's done via Instagram highlights, from his dropping 77 points to casually preparing for a future dunk contest. But there's another reason LeBron's familiar with the Phenom. One of Williams' AAU teammates was none other than Bronny James.
Bronny throws it down.
That is a Sports Center top 10 nominee, no doubt.
How about Bronny with that touch? Outstanding for the freshman.
The son of the king and the most famous high school athlete in the country. Sierra Canyon, where Bronny enrolled for his high school career, has become a barnstorming team in the vein of Ball family era Chino Hills, or even the Globetrotters before them. Their games have spanned everywhere from California to Texas to Massachusetts, and they're broadcasted and streamed nationally on ESPN. They drew more than 17,000 fans for a game in Minnesota. They filled arenas of 5,000 in a season-opening trip to China. Even Drake is getting in on the action. He might have rocked a Zion high school jersey, but he wasn't sitting courtside at these games like he is for Bronny. Take a look at the crowd in 2016 when Chino Hills, then a social media phenomenon, played at the Hoop Hall Classic in Springfield. Now, fast forward 4 years later, nearly 2.5 hours before Sierra Canyon tipped off at the Hoop Hall, no seats were available. An hour and a half before, no standing room was available. The whole tournament sold out in advance in 2020 for the first time in the 19-year history of the event.
BJ Boston over Antetokounmpo.
Post that on Instagram, Twitter, and on the big mothership.
But some of the most sought-after spaces along either baseline, where scores of photographers and videographers are showing up in gyms across the country to feed the insatiable demand for high school highlights.
Everybody's fighting for spots. There's not really enough room around the baseline, so people will go drop their gear in a spot 2 hours before the game starts. My goal when I'm in there is to give athletes what I never had growing up, which was just, documenting my story on the court.
Cameron Look, aka Cool Mac, first picked up a camera about 3 years ago with no experience or any formal training. And now, he's an in-demand freelancer with nearly 200,000 Instagram followers and is also serving as Sierra Canyon's unofficial traveling photographer.
It's crazy. There's really no real way to fathom or encompass what's going on unless you've been there yourself in person. I can say, obviously, it's nothing like I've ever seen, but I think just speaking in terms of basketball history, this team has, some of the most hype that any team, whether it's high school, college, or professional, has ever had. Yes, these are kids. These are 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old athletes, but what we also need to realize is that these kids are real celebrities. These kids, from a content engagement perspective, get more engagement than a lot of professional athletes do.
Even though all of this engagement is at stake, the barrier to entry for these content creators is a lot lower than it would be at a pro game or a college game. That level of access has brought out a ton of people to capture the NBA stars of tomorrow and the internet stars of today. One of those is Babson College senior Liam Callahan, whose work you can see on the feeds of Slam Magazine, a brand that's been completely reinvigorated by the popularity of amateur basketball.
Essentially, anybody can walk into a gym and make a player a highlight tape. So this is giving players mass amount of content to kind of flood out there, and fans can keep up with their favorite players daily. Whereas before, you'd wait for the end of a season to see a mixtape from a player on YouTube. And I think that's allowed them to really become more popular with this steady stream of content coming their way.
The sort of content that sells on social media isn't really surprising. Highlight culture centers around guards and wing players and their flashy dribbles, passes, and dunks. Gen Zers just aren't tossing around likes to guys getting good positioning and setting strong screens.
Obviously, if you don't grab them within the first few seconds, there's another piece of content that they can just swipe slightly up on their screen and watch something else. For the players, I think it's incentivized them, if they want to get popular, to really have these highlight moments that would be share-worthy and viral.
Talent evaluators, well, they see right through that.
Players like that who are hyped and or who are social media internet stars at a young age, if we don't have them ranked high, the ESPN guys, the Draft Express guys, they hate us. And a lot of times it's become kind of our job in some ways to keep it real and evaluate these guys through the prism of what an NBA prospect looks like.
Still, the instant gratification players receive from short-form virality gets at the heart of a deeper issue. This whole scene and its trappings of fame is changing the way that these kids play basketball. Noah Tates, a 4-star guard headed to Stanford next season, has seen a noticeable shift.
The game's all about making winning plays, and when you let yourself get consumed by the social media side of it. Instead of making an extra pass, you might see a kid go one-on-one and go, try to do something for themselves rather than for their team.
And it's hard not to get seduced by the attention, even for the country's elite players. Namari Burnett lived that after he dropped 34 points on LaMelo Ball in the previously undefeated Spire Institute in a shocking 35-point blowout win in 2019.
I remember after the game when we had won, they were crowding us. They were excited for us, so that made me even more excited. And as I looked at my phone and seeing like 100 followers at once, it was crazy. I'm like, how did this many people see this game? And it was one of the moments that I'll never forget.
Social media is helping drive basketball's massive popularity among young people. According to a Nielsen study from 2019, 35.3% of Gen Z is interested in basketball. That number is 24.7% of people aged 25 to 69. But at the Sloan Conference in 2019, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver singled out social media as a root cause of loneliness throughout the league.
I mean, I think we live a bit in the age of anxiety.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's I've read studies on this. I think part of it is a direct product of social media.
Yes.
And I think those players we're talking about, when I meet with them, what strikes me is that they are truly unhappy.
Graham Betchart is a mental performance coach who's worked with players like Aaron Gordon, Ben Simmons, and Karl Anthony Towns. He sees the isolating effects NBA players grapple with dripping down to the next generation of stars.
People want fame. It's a drug, and it calls them. And young people are going to copy what pro athletes are doing. So if pro athletes are on social media, tweeting at people, or on TikTok or Instagram, they're going to do the same thing because that's the thing to do. And then you go talk to the pro athletes, and they feel empty inside.
Betchart also spoke about the debilitating effects these players comparing themselves to their peers have on their self-esteem. In general, these are teenagers trying to figure out who they are while also constantly being exposed to the opinions of others, which they take incredibly seriously. In basketball specifically, this manifests itself in pervasive player comparisons.
One that comes to mind is Thon Maker, right? So if we looked at Thon Maker as energy center, he plays super hard, he's 7 feet tall, he's an amazing kid, all these things are true, good length, and on occasion he can step out and make a three. Great, like that sounds like a good prospect, right? But at 15, 16, 17 years old, the narrative around Thon Maker is, oh, here's the next unicorn, the 7'1" point guard. He handles, he's the next KD or this and that. And then when you see what Thon Maker actually is, you're disappointed. And that's not the kid's fault.
And that's not even taking into account less heralded prospects, the ones who aren't generating social buzz. The late bloomers like Pascal Siakam, Jimmy Butler, or Kendrick Nunn are established in the NBA now, but they weren't dealing with the current level of online scrutiny in their teens.
Instagram and these things showing everything you're doing, it's hard because people don't want to fall down. They don't want to make mistakes. But how do you learn to walk and run? You fall down.
In fairness, prospects who brand themselves well can position themselves for lucrative endorsement deals, creating non-basketball revenue streams for them and their families. In the fashion-centric era of basketball, players post just as many fit pics as they do on-court highlights.
They're almost like the child celebrities of this age, kind of like the Disney stars of this age, where they have that level of fame and that level of pressure on them to succeed. And I think it relates too because kids can kind of see themselves in the role of a high school basketball player, relate to that player more, and they want to be that person with that amount of fame in high school at such a young age, with obviously a ton of skill, kind of swag on and off the court, and relate that to the fashion aspect that's tied into the game off the court.
This massive cultural shift hasn't been universally well received. On his podcast, JJ Redick said he's seen a change in some players' focus.
There's more. There's more guys concerned with getting a pregame fit on Instagram than they are worrying about the win and loss of a basketball game.
All of this branding, hype, and criticism will hold additional weight with the impending abolishment of the NBA's one-and-done rule, which will once again allow high school players to jump directly to the pros.
I don't think that NBA teams are just going to look at, okay, here are the 10 prospects with the most Instagram followers. We're going to go evaluate them. I just hope that the next generation really takes it seriously and aren't afraid to kind of listen to things they don't want to hear. I mean, if I was a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, with 10 million Instagram followers, and everyone telling me how awesome I am, like, I'm not sure I would make it either.
Social media provides you with plenty of opportunities to be aware of feeling a little bit uncomfortable inside, and it could trigger you to want to do some of this work. Learn how to breathe, learn how to be present, learn how to feel a trigger and choose your response instead of reacting blindly to an emotion.
There is no player who was anointed so young and dealt with all the exposure that came with it as impressively as LeBron James. Which brings us back to Bronny and Sierra Canyon.
There may never be another player that has this circus around them. All this combination of talent on one team under one roof is very rare, and then also the level of fame is just unparalleled in history of high school.
The world has been heaping expectations on the eldest James child since the day he was born. Until May 2019, Bronny didn't even have a public Instagram page, which led to dozens of imposters and fan pages opportunistically filling that void. The real Bronny now has more than 5 million Instagram followers and finds himself in the middle of a scene where Lil Uzi Vert is traveling to catch his favorite players and Quavo is calling up Mack Mcclung to congratulate him on his success. The absurdity of all of this is not lost on any of the players.
Oh, it's definitely crazy. It's like on like Baller's Life and Slam is more interesting than, you know, college and NBA basketball as far as everybody tuning in and asking other people questions and high school debates on like who's better. People really tune in and make sure they check us out.
Just younger kids just gaining more fame and more clout. You know, kids just got to remain humble and not get too big-headed, because you see certain kids, if they're big-headed early on in high school, you'll see by the time they're a senior, nobody's really talking about them anymore. But for the kids that stay humble, they turn out.
Of course, Bronny has the ideal role model to handle all of this, and he hasn't looked overwhelmed either on the court or off of it, where the James family is a TikTok sensation. He's used to the speculation about whether he'll one day play with his dad in the NBA, and he can handle the breathless anticipation of an expectant crowd, but not every player who comes through the ranks will be built for this, and there's great uncertainty in any final outcomes.
You gotta remember, these are high school kids that go, take algebra and geometry during the day. These aren't grown adults who have traveled the world and, have 40 million followers.
I think we're going to see over the next 10, 15, 20 years how it plays out. Like what this generation does when they get into their 20s and 30s. How present they are. Can they build connection on a deep level? And I think we'll have to kind of watch this generation and keep an eye on them.
It is impossible to know where the story ends. Some will use their platforms to become leading voices in the NBA or bring their audiences to other ventures. But there's going to be kids who are labeled as busts before they even graduate from high school. There will be prep-to-pro disappointments like Kwame Brown, Sebastian Telfair, and Robert Swift before them. The media market is spreading to other high school sports, and the follower counts are going to continue ballooning as the views, the likes, the comments, and the cash keep flowing.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.